Life has a way of blindsiding you when you least expect it. One minute, you're trudging through the daily grind, thinking you've got everything figured out, and the next, bam, you're standing knee-deep in a reality you never saw coming. I was just a regular guy, a mechanic who spent more time under cars than at home. 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, covered in grease, hands cracked from the work, back sore from bending over engines all day. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. I paid the bills, put food on the table, and made sure my wife, Sarah, and our 3 kids never had to worry about a thing. That's what a man does, right? He sacrifices. He grinds. He builds a life for his family, no matter how much it wears him down. Sarah, though, she lived in a different world. She was a kind of woman who knew how to play people, how to make them hang on her every word. Smart, calculating, beautiful in that effortless way that made men turn their heads when she walked by. I'd seen it 100 times. The way she could flash a smile and get a free coffee at a cafe. How she'd sweet-talk customer service reps into giving her discounts or upgrades. She had a way with people, and she always got what she wanted. I used to admire it. Thought I was lucky to have a wife who could charm the world. But looking back, maybe I should have seen it for what it really was. That summer, Sarah had been planning a trip to the lake with the kids and her sisters. She'd been talking about it for weeks, going on about how much fun they'd have, campfires, swimming, the whole deal. I knew from the start that I wouldn't be able to come. My job didn't allow for last-minute vacations, and she knew that. She never pushed me to take time off, never even asked if there was a chance I could come. Instead, she planned everything as if I wasn't even an option. It wasn't unusual. Sarah handled all the family trips, and I usually just worked through them. But something about this one felt different. At the time, I ignored it. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks on me. Then came the surprise. It was a Thursday afternoon when my boss called me into his office. He's an old school guy, the type who believes a man should work himself to the bone. He never handed out favors, never gave time off unless it was an emergency. So when he looked at me and said, "You've been busting your ass too hard. Take the next week off paid," I almost laughed in his face, thinking he was joking. But he wasn't. It was the first real break I'd had in years. And the first thought that popped into my head wasn't about relaxing or catching up on sleep. No! I was excited. I'd get to spend time with my kids, be the fun dad for once. I imagined their faces lighting up when they saw me at the lake, throwing them in the water, teaching them how to fish. And Sarah, I figured she'd be happy too. I rushed home, practically bouncing up the front steps, eager to tell her the good news. I expected her to be thrilled, to jump into my arms, maybe even say something about how nice it would be to have me there. But that's not what happened. I walked in and found her in the kitchen, cutting vegetables. When she turned around and saw me standing there, her whole body went rigid. Her grip on the knife tightened just a little. And for a split second, so fast I almost missed it, I saw something in her face. She covered it up quickly, forcing a smile, but I knew my wife. That smile didn't reach her eyes. It was the same smile she used when a neighbor she didn't like stopped by for small talk. The kind of smile you put on when you're pretending. I told her the news, expecting her reaction to change, for her to relax and be happy about it. But it didn't. She nodded stiffly and said something like, "Oh, that's great." But the enthusiasm wasn't there. Her hands fidgeted. Her shoulders stayed tense. Something wasn't right. I told myself I was imagining it, that she was just overwhelmed with packing, thinking about all the things she still had to do before leaving. But my gut told me otherwise. Sarah always loved planning things down to the last detail. Every trip, every family event. She made lists, double-checked everything, made sure there were no surprises. And yet, here I was, throwing a massive wrench into her plans, and instead of being happy about it, she looked uneasy. In fact, the closer we got to leaving for the trip, the worse it got. Sarah wasn't acting like a wife who was excited to have her husband join her. She was acting like someone trying to hold a house of cards together, hoping no one would breathe too hard. At first, it was little things. She was on her phone more than usual, always tilting the screen away from me. Normally, she'd leave it lying around without a care in the world, but now it was glued to her hand. Whenever I walked into the room, she'd quickly swipe out of whatever she was doing, putting on that same fake smile. Once, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the microwave door, her thumb hovering over the delete button right as I stepped in. A second later, her phone was face down on the counter, and she was acting like nothing had happened. It wasn't normal. Sarah wasn't the type to get jumpy. She was always in control, always one step ahead of everything. But now, she was slipping. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe she was just making plans with her sisters. Maybe she was handling last-minute details for the trip. I wanted to believe that. But then I caught her doing it again. Late that night, when she thought I was asleep, I heard the faint clicking of a keyboard. I cracked one eye open and saw the glow of her laptop screen from the other side of the bed. She was typing something, hunched over, back stiff. I rolled over just enough to see, careful not to make a sound, an email. She was sending an email. I couldn't read the whole thing, but I caught a few words before she hit send and immediately deleted it. Then she went to her trash folder, emptied it. That wasn't normal behavior. Sarah wasn't some tech genius, but she was careful. Always careful. She didn't just delete things, she erased them. Like she didn't want any trace of whatever she had just sent. She closed the laptop, slid it under the bed, and curled up next to me like nothing had happened. But I couldn't sleep after that. The next morning, after Sarah and the kids left the house to get some last-minute supplies, I decided to check. I knew her passwords, at least the ones she used for her social media and email. I had never been the jealous or suspicious type, but something about last night wasn't sitting right with me. I opened her laptop, went to her email, and, just as I expected, there was nothing in her inbox. Nothing in her sent folder either. But then I checked the trash. There was one email she had forgotten to permanently delete. The subject line was short, "Change of plans." I clicked on it, and what I read made my blood turn ice cold. "Plans have changed. Michael is coming with us. We'll have to be more careful, but I'll figure out a way." The email had been sent to someone named LJ. I sat there staring at the screen, my mind racing. Who the hell was LJ? And why did Sarah need to figure out a way just because I was coming on the trip? There was no way to misinterpret what I was seeing. She was hiding something big. I felt like a fool. For years, I had worked my ass off, trusting that I was building something real with this woman. But I wasn't the type to jump to conclusions without proof. If Sarah was lying to me, if she was doing something behind my back, I needed to know exactly what it was. And I had a feeling this trip to the lake was about to give me all the answers I needed. That email wasn't just some random message. It was proof that something was being kept from me. Plans have changed. Michael is coming with us. We'll have to be more careful, but I'll figure out a way. Who the hell was we? Who was LJ? And why was Sarah acting like my presence on the trip was a problem that needed to be solved? I wasn't a genius, but I knew when something didn't add up. Sarah had always been good at keeping up appearances, but now I was seeing through the cracks in her performance. The nervous glances, the quick deletions, the way she had frozen when I told her I was coming. It all pointed to one thing. She was hiding something. I sat in front of her laptop, staring at the email. There was no other context, just that short, cryptic message. But that name, LJ, it stuck in my mind like a splinter. I thought back through the years, trying to remember if Sarah had ever mentioned anyone with those initials. I came up blank, but then an idea hit me. Sarah and I had been together for over a decade, but before me, she had a life of her own. High school, college, past relationships. If this was someone from her past, maybe I could dig something up. I went to the closet, dug through some old storage bins until I found what I was looking for, Sarah's high school yearbook. It had been sitting there for years, collecting dust, filled with memories from before I ever knew her. Flipping through the pages, I scanned for names. It didn't take long before my heart started pounding. Leon Johnson, a face I had never seen before, but a name that suddenly made perfect sense. Leon Johnson, LG. He wasn't just some random guy. He was Sarah's ex-boyfriend from high school. The pieces were starting to come together. Sarah had never talked much about her past relationships. She always brushed it off, said the past was the past. But now, I was starting to think she had a damn good reason for staying quiet. I sat back, the yearbook open on my lap, staring at the picture of the guy who might be the reason my wife was acting so strange. He had that typical golden boy look, tall, athletic, the kind of guy who probably had every girl in school wrapped around his finger. Had Sarah ever really let go of him? Or had she been keeping him in the background this whole time? I needed more proof. The email was suspicious, but I wasn't about to make accusations without something concrete. If Sarah was lying to me, I had to catch her red-handed. So I played along. I acted normal, maybe even a little extra cheerful, pretending I was excited for the trip. I told myself I'd be patient, that I'd watch her closely, wait for her to slip up. And sure enough, she did. Over the next few days, I noticed how careful she was being. She never left her phone unattended, never let me glance at her screen. Whenever she thought I wasn't looking, she'd check messages, quickly swiping away notifications. Then there were the whispered phone calls. She never spoke long, never said anything I could make out, but I heard them. One night, while she was in the shower, I picked up her phone, hoping to find something she had missed. But she had covered her tracks. No messages, no call logs, nothing. It was like she had wiped it clean. She was careful, and that only made me more certain that she had something to hide. By the time we were packing up for the lake, my mind was already set. I wasn't just going along for a vacation. I was going to find out the truth. By the time we reached the lake, I had one goal in mind: to catch Sarah in the act. I wasn't going to confront her without proof. Women like her, calculating, manipulative, they don't crack under suspicion alone. They twist the narrative, make you feel like you're the crazy one. No, I needed something solid, and I was going to get it. The lake was beautiful. Calm water stretching for miles, surrounded by thick woods. The kind of place that felt cut off from the rest of the world. Sarah's sisters and their families were already there when we arrived, setting up tents, getting the firewood stacked. The kids ran off toward the water, already stripping down to their swimsuits. Sarah, she was different. She smiled, played the role of the loving wife, but I saw through it. She was scanning the area, checking her phone when she thought no one was looking. Her body was tense, her eyes flicking toward the parking lot every few minutes. She was waiting for someone. I forced myself to stay calm, to act like nothing was wrong. I helped unload the car, set up the tent, even laughed along with Sarah's sisters when they joked about how rare it was for me to take time off work. I played the part of the oblivious husband perfectly, but inside, I was watching, waiting, and then it happened. It was late afternoon when I told Sarah I was going ATV riding with her brother-in-law. That was the excuse I gave her anyway. The truth was, I had no intention of leaving. Instead, I circled back, making my way behind the cabins, staying out of sight. And that's when I saw him, a tall man, built, confident, walking toward our camp. He wasn't one of Sarah's family members. I knew that instantly. He carried himself differently, like he belonged there but shouldn't have been. Leon Johnson. Even though I had only seen his face in an old yearbook, I knew it was him. Sarah saw him too, and the way she reacted made my stomach turn. She didn't just smile, she lit up. Her entire body changed, her movements softer, more welcoming. She glanced around quickly, making sure no one was paying attention, and then she stepped toward him. And when they got close enough, she touched his arm. Sarah wasn't just having an affair. She had been planning to spend this trip with him. I wanted to storm over there, grab Leon by the throat, demand answers from Sarah right then and there. But I held back. If I lost my temper now, I'd be the bad guy. She'd deny everything, gaslight me into thinking I was seeing things. No! I had to be smarter. I had to catch them in a way they couldn't talk their way out of. I waited, lurking in the trees like some kind of predator, watching as Sarah and Leon whispered to each other. She was telling him something, probably about me, about how they had to be careful, about how she'd figure out a way to sneak off. And that's when I got the idea. Sarah thought I had gone riding. That meant she'd feel safe sneaking off with Leon. All I had to do was follow. It didn't take long. An hour later, I saw her make up some excuse to her sisters, something about needing to grab towels from the cabin. But I knew better. I slipped through the trees, moving quickly, staying low. And sure enough, Leon followed her. They were headed to the changing rooms near the lake, small wooden sheds with just enough privacy for exactly what they had in mind. I crept closer, my breath steady, my hands shaking from rage. And then I heard them, voices, whispering, and then laughter. Sarah's laughter, the same laugh she used to have for me. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone. I wasn't about to barge in and give them an easy way out. No, I wanted undeniable proof. So I hit record, and then I heard everything. The way Sarah giggled, the way Leon whispered to her, the sound of movement, clothes shifting, hands fumbling, and then the sound that sealed it, a soft moan. I had them. The proof was right there on my phone. Every whispered word, every breath, every disgusting little sound that told me exactly what was happening behind that door. Sarah and Leon weren't just rekindling some old high school romance. They were in deep, and they thought they could do it right under my nose. I could have kicked the door in, confronted them right then and there, but that would have been too easy, too predictable. They would have panicked, made excuses, maybe even tried to turn it on me. No, that wasn't good enough. I slipped away before they could notice, my mind racing. Confronting them here, at the lake, wouldn't be enough. I wanted to humiliate them. I wanted Sarah to feel as small and pathetic as she had made me. Then it hit me. A bonfire. It was tradition on these trips. A big roaring fire by the lake. The kids roasting marshmallows, the adults laughing, drinking beer. And tonight, it would serve a different purpose. I made my way back to camp, acting casual, greeting Sarah's sisters like nothing was wrong. No one suspected a thing. Sarah was still grabbing towels, and everyone else was too busy setting up for the night to notice she was missing. Perfect. I spotted the pile of firewood and kindling stacked near the pit. Right next to it, a bunch of personal belongings, bags, clothes, towels. Sarah and the others had left their things nearby while they set up dinner. That's when I saw it. Sarah's bag, and next to it, a man's jacket, Leon's jacket. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed every piece of clothing I could find, Sarah's, Leon's, whatever they had left outside the changing rooms, and tossed them onto the firewood pile. Then I waited. The sun had started to set by the time Sarah and Leon finally emerged, thinking they'd gotten away with it. She had fixed her hair, smoothed out her clothes, even put on that same innocent smile she always did. Leon stayed back, not wanting to draw attention to himself. Smart move. But I wasn't about to let them slink off so easily. By then, the fire was roaring. The kids were laughing, roasting marshmallows, completely unaware that their mother had just been rolling around in a filthy changing room with some other man. I made sure everyone was gathered around before I made my move. Sarah was chatting with her sisters, completely at ease. She thought she had gotten away with it. That's when I stood up, dusted off my hands, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You guys ready for a real bonfire? I brought some extra fuel." And with that, I tossed another pile of clothing into the flames. Sarah's face changed instantly. At first, it was confusion, then realization, then pure horror. She recognized the clothes immediately. So did Leon. And that's when I saw it, the panic. Sarah shot up from her seat, her hands clenching at her sides, her eyes darting toward the lake. I could see her trying to think, trying to come up with an excuse. But I didn't give her the chance. I turned to the crowd, grinning. Funny thing about this pile of clothes, it doesn't belong to me. And it sure as hell doesn't belong to my kids. People started murmuring, looking at each other. Sarah's sisters furrowed their brows, confused. Sarah opened her mouth, but before she could say a word, I turned toward the lake. "Hey, Sarah, you might want to check on Leon. I think he's got a bit of a problem." Every head turned toward the water, and there they were, Leon, standing waist-deep, looking like a man who had just seen a ghost. And next to him, Sarah's clothes, his clothes, everything they had left behind in the changing room, now sitting in the fire. I'll never forget the look on Sarah's face when she realized what I had done. It was like watching a castle crumble. All that confidence, all that careful manipulation, gone in an instant. She didn't know whether to run to the lake or stay put. Her sisters were staring at her, confused. The kids had no idea what was happening, but they could tell something was wrong. Leon tried to move, but he was stuck, trapped, and I made sure to twist the knife just a little more. I walked up to the edge of the water, just close enough that they could see me clearly, and I spoke. "Nice to finally meet you, Leon. I'm Michael, Sarah's husband." Then I smiled. "Have a great night." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, naked, humiliated, and exposed for everyone to see. Sarah didn't come back to camp that night. Neither did Leon. Her sisters were whispering, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. I didn't give them an explanation. I didn't owe them one. I just sat back, drinking a beer, watching the fire burn. Sarah didn't return to the campsite that night. Neither did Leon. I didn't go looking for her. I didn't have to. I could already picture how it was playing out. She was probably sitting somewhere in the dark, wrapped in a towel, whispering frantically to Leon, trying to figure out how to fix this, how to explain, how to spin the story so she could still come out on top. But there was no fixing it. Not this time. I sat by the fire, sipping my beer, watching the flames swallow the last remnants of their little secret. The others were still in shock. Sarah's sisters whispered among themselves, occasionally glancing at me, but no one dared to say anything. What could they say? They had just witnessed the perfect wife, the perfect mother, get exposed as a liar and a cheat in front of her own family. The kids were asleep by then, thankfully. They didn't understand what had happened. They just thought Mom had gone swimming and lost her clothes. If only that were the truth. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the fire until the last ember died out, my mind racing. Not about Sarah, not about Leon, but about what came next. Because I wasn't staying. Not in this marriage. Not in this life. Sarah had already been making plans behind my back. Now, it was my turn. Sarah finally showed up in the morning, looking like she'd been through hell. Her hair was a mess, her eyes puffy from crying. She had found some old clothes, probably borrowed from one of her sisters, but they didn't fit right. She looked uncomfortable. Good. She didn't speak to me, just walked past, pretending like none of it had happened, like she could just avoid the situation until she figured out how to manipulate her way out of it. I played along, acted calm, didn't give her the reaction she was expecting. That probably scared her more than anything. The drive home was silent. The kids chatted in the back seat, oblivious. Sarah sat stiffly next to me, hands folded in her lap, staring out the window. Every now and then, I saw her shift, like she wanted to say something. But she didn't. She was waiting for me to ask her about it, to demand an explanation, to start the fight, so she could control how it ended. But I didn't give her the chance. I let the silence suffocate her. By the time we pulled into the driveway, Sarah was practically vibrating with tension. She wanted to talk, to spin the story before I could make a decision, but she had already lost. The second we got inside, Sarah turned to me, opening her mouth to finally say something. Probably some half-baked excuse, some lie she had spent all night crafting. But I just walked past her, straight to our bedroom, and started packing. I could feel her watching me, her breathing getting shallow. She followed me inside, her voice low, hesitant. "Michael, can we just—" I didn't answer, didn't even look at her. I grabbed my suitcase, started filling it with clothes, important documents, everything I'd need to make a clean break. She reached for my arm, but I pulled away. That's when her voice changed. "Michael, stop. Let's talk about this." Talk. She wanted to talk? Where was all this concern when she was sneaking off to screw her high school boyfriend in a changing room? Where was this desperate tone when she was deleting emails and making plans behind my back? I zipped up the suitcase and finally turned to her. I didn't say a word, but she saw it in my eyes. This was over. She started panicking then, following me as I moved through the house, trying to plead her case. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. "Michael, please. Think about the kids." That one almost made me stop. Almost. But then I remembered something. Those kids, our kids, didn't look a damn thing like me. And suddenly, the thought that had been gnawing at the back of my mind for years came roaring to the front. What if they weren't mine? I had never doubted it before. Never had a reason to. But now? Now I wasn't sure of anything. That was my next move. Over the next few days, I set everything in motion. I went to the bank and pulled my name off every joint account, took my savings, drained the emergency fund, everything I had contributed over the years. I quit my job. My boss wasn't happy, but I didn't care. I needed a fresh start. Then I made an appointment for a DNA test. I didn't tell Sarah. Didn't say a damn thing. I just left the house every day, going about my business like I wasn't dismantling everything she thought she controlled. She was still in damage control mode, acting overly sweet, cooking my favorite meals, trying to play the perfect wife again. She thought if she kept up the act long enough, I'd forget. But I wasn't going to forget, and once those DNA results came back, I had already made up my mind. I was leaving no matter what. But there was one thing I needed to know before I walked away for good. Were the kids even mine? That question alone made me sick. I had spent years working myself to the bone for them, teaching them how to ride bikes, staying up late when they were sick, saving every extra dollar to give them a better life than I ever had. They were my kids. Or at least, I thought they were. But now, I wasn't so sure. Sarah hadn't said a word about that night at the lake. She had gone from panic to eerily calm, like she was just waiting for me to cool down so she could slither her way back into my good graces. That was her pattern. Whenever we fought, she'd just wait me out, knowing I'd eventually let it go. Not this time. This time, I wasn't angry. I was done. Getting the test done was easy. I took samples from all 3 kids when Sarah wasn't around. Simple cheek swabs, in and out. It felt wrong, like I was betraying them, but I had to know the truth. While I waited for the results, I hired a private investigator. If Sarah had been lying to me about this, then who knew what else she had hidden over the years? It didn't take long for the investigator to find something, and what he found shattered what little was left of my world. Sarah and Leon hadn't just reconnected recently. They had been seeing each other for years. While I was working 12-hour shifts, trying to build a future for my family, Sarah had been sneaking off with him, over and over again. The affair started before our youngest was even born, which meant the kids, all 3 of them, there was no way. The results came in the next day. I almost didn't open them, almost shoved the envelope into a drawer, pretending it didn't exist. But I had come too far to stop now. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper, my eyes scanning the results. And then 0% probability of paternity for all 3 kids. Not 1, not 2, all 3. The kids I had raised, the kids I had loved. They weren't mine. They had never been mine. I don't remember how long I sat there, staring at that piece of paper. Minutes? Hours? Time didn't feel real anymore. I had spent years breaking my back for a lie. Sarah had taken everything from me. My trust, my marriage, my future. And now, I realized she had stolen the one thing I had left. My family. The front door creaked open. I looked up to see Sarah standing there, holding a grocery bag, giving me that same sweet, practiced smile. "Hey, babe, I got your favorite." I held up the paper. Her smile faded. And for the first time since this all started, she looked scared. Sarah stared at the paper in my hand, her face frozen. For a split second, I saw something rare, true, genuine fear. Not the kind she could fake. Not the crocodile tears she used to get her way. This was different. She knew. She knew what I had just found out. Her fingers tightened around the grocery bag. She didn't even try to play dumb. "No, what's that?" No fake confusion. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My whole world had just collapsed, and she was standing there like a statue, waiting to see how I'd react. I dropped the paper onto the table. Sarah took a slow step forward, then another. She set the grocery bag down, her lips parting like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. And then she spoke. "Michael, please." That was it. That was all she said. Not an apology, not an explanation, just that one pathetic word, like it would be enough to erase everything. It made me sick. This woman had spent years lying to me, using me, stealing everything I had left to give. She had built an entire life on a foundation of betrayal, knowing damn well that I wasn't the father of those kids. And she had let me love them anyway. My hands curled into fists. I felt my nails dig into my palms, but I didn't say a word. I just turned, walked past her, and went straight to the bedroom. She followed me, her breathing shaky. "Michael, wait. Please, let's just talk." I ignored her, opened the closet, grabbed another suitcase. I had already packed most of my essentials, but now I was moving faster. "Michael, stop. This isn't..." She swallowed hard. "You don't understand." I threw a handful of shirts into the suitcase, then grabbed my phone. My lawyer was next on my list. I needed to file for divorce immediately. Sarah grabbed my wrist. I finally turned to her, and what I saw wasn't regret. It was panic. Not because she felt bad, not because she was sorry, because she knew she was about to lose everything. "We can fix this," she blurted out. "You're their father, Michael. You raised them. That means something." That did mean something. To me, but not to her. She had taken my love for those kids and weaponized it. She had let me believe in something that was never real. I yanked my wrist away and kept packing. Sarah wasn't done. She was scrambling now, her voice shaking. "Michael, don't do this. Think about the kids. They love you." That hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I stopped. For a second, I just stood there, staring down at the suitcase. My chest felt tight. The kids did love me. I had been their father in every way that mattered, except for biology. But whose fault was that? Hers. Sarah had stolen that choice from me. She had robbed me of the chance to be a real father, to my own real children. I turned to her, my voice calm. "You stole 10 years of my life, Sarah." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "You let me believe they were mine. You let me work myself to death for a lie." Tears welled up in her eyes. But I wasn't falling for that. Not now. Not ever again. I grabbed my suitcase and brushed past her. She didn't stop me. Not yet. I made it to the front door, before I heard another voice. Michael, wait. Sarah's younger sister, Lisa, stood there, looking nervous. She must have come in through the back door while Sarah was crying upstairs. Lisa was the only one in Sarah's family I had ever really liked. She was blunt, didn't play games like Sarah did, and right now, she looked torn. Just talk to her, Lisa said softly. I stared at her, waiting. She's a mess, Michael. She knows she screwed up, but she loves you. And the kids. Lisa hesitated. The kids need you. I exhaled slowly. Lisa meant well, but she didn't get it. They're not mine. Lisa flinched, like she hadn't expected me to say it out loud. I let the silence hang between us for a second before stepping past her. Lisa grabbed my arm. Michael, don't just throw everything away. You're the only father they've ever known. That was never my choice. Asterisk, I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. Lisa fell silent. I pulled my arm free and walked out the door. Sarah could send whoever she wanted. Her sisters, her friends, even the damn priest from our wedding. It wouldn't change a thing. I was done. The next morning, I got the final confirmation. The DNA test results were emailed to me. I already knew what they would say. 0% probability of paternity. For the second time, I stared at those numbers, feeling nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just a dull, hollow acceptance. This was my reality now. The kids I had spent a decade raising weren't mine. Sarah had been sleeping with Leon for years. And I had spent my best years working, sacrificing, suffering for a lie. Well, no more. I called my lawyer. Divorce papers were filed. The accounts were closed. I had cut off everything that tied me to Sarah, except for the one thing I couldn't erase. The kids. Or at least, the kids I thought were mine. I hadn't spoken to Sarah since that last argument, hadn't answered her texts, hadn't picked up her calls. She had gone from begging to raging, then back to pleading. The same cycle, the same tricks. But they didn't work anymore. I was done. Or so I thought. A week after I left, Sarah showed up. Not alone. She had the kids with her. I should have slammed the door in her face. Should have told her to take her lies and leave. But when I looked down and saw their little faces, confused, worried, something inside me cracked. Not for her, but for them. They had no idea what was happening. No idea why Dad had suddenly disappeared. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me so Sarah wouldn't have the satisfaction of stepping into my new life. The kids' eyes lit up. They ran to me, hugging me like nothing had changed, like I was still the same man I had been a month ago, like I was still their father. And maybe I was. Maybe biology didn't matter. Maybe. Then I looked up and saw Sarah watching me, and I saw the smirk she tried to hide. That's when I knew. This wasn't about the kids. This was about control. She thought if she dangled them in front of me, I'd break. That I'd come crawling back. That she could still win. I crouched down, ruffled the kids' hair, forced a smile. Hey, guys. I need to talk to your mom for a second, okay? They nodded, ran off to the car, and then it was just us. Sarah exhaled, like she was about to deliver some grand speech. I didn't let her. Don't ever use them against me again. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I leaned in just enough so she could hear me over the sound of the kids playing. I know everything, Sarah. She swallowed. You should have told me the truth years ago, but you didn't. She shook her head. Michael, No. I cut her off. This isn't for you to explain anymore. I know what you are, and soon, so will they. That did something to her. Her face drained of color, because she knew if I ever told the kids the truth, she'd lose them too. And maybe that was my last piece of revenge. Not fire. Not words, not court orders, just time. Because one day, those kids would grow up, and they would start asking questions. And Sarah, she'd have to look them in the eyes and decide whether to tell them the truth or live with another lie. I gave her one last look, then turned away, walking back inside. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't need to. She had already lost. Months passed. The divorce was finalized. I had moved to another city, started a new job, built a new life. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Then one night, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, almost let it go to voicemail. But something made me pick up. Silence. Then her voice. Michael, I made a horrible mistake. I didn't say a word, didn't ask what she meant, didn't need to, because I already knew. I let the silence stretch, listening to her breathe, waiting for me to give her something. And then, click, I hung up and walked forward into my new life, never looking back. It's not Sarah, not Leon, not the years I wasted. It's something else, something I can't forget. Sarah never begged for me to come back, never said she loved me, never said she was sorry. But that last call, her voice wasn't just guilty. It wasn't just regret. It was fear, like she knew something I didn't. And maybe